Welcome to Relatively Famous, the podcast where all of our guests are relatives of famous people. I'm Chip White, and my famous relative is Vanna White of Wheel of Fortune. And on this episode, our guest is someone you're going to learn about just as much as I am. I've never met this guy, but I'm super excited. Not only because of who he is, but the fact that he's a cousin of one of my favorite musicians and live performers, Lyle Lovett. On the show today, we have Mr. Bill Field.
Relatively Famous podcast with Chip White.
Mr. Bill Field, welcome to Relatively Famous.
Thank you so much, bud. Good to be here, Chip.
Yeah, I tried to do a little research, but my producer gave me the wrong name, so I don't know. I am literally going to learn about you today as we have this conversation. I'm going to be flying by the seat of my pants.
I was on America's top 10 most wanted list for 4 years in a row. And no, I'm joking. No, I'm a TV show host. I'm a cartoonist. I'm an animator by trade. I do an awful lot of directing of short films and industrial films. I used to be a comedian years ago and I was an opening act for Bill Hicks for over a year. I've basically been in media my entire adult career. And as a kid, I was a comic book collector and comic book artist. I mean, only comics I saw, because I drew them for myself. And so being here in the middle of the secret comic book store, a.k.a. Nelco Comics, is really a great it's a relief for me to be in an environment like this. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you very much.
Very cool, man. Yeah, I was told that you wrote a book about comics, that you love comics.
Yes, I love it. And I wrote a book about Neil Adams, co-wrote with Alex Grand, who he and I do the Comic Book Historian podcast and have since, I want to say 2017. And we've interviewed some of the most important people in comics, and one of them was Neil Adams. Neil, of course, for those who don't know, was probably the most prolific Batman artist out there. He was someone who brought realism and almost photorealism, like Alex Ross does now. I'm sorry. I get confused with Alex Grant and Alex. I have too many Alexes in my life. But it's funny because Neil changed the face of comics. And he passed away a few months after our book came out, and at age 80. And he was just a really unique, great guy. He had a bit of an ego, but it was earned. It was earned completely. He not only was he a great artist, but he was an activist for artists such as the creators of Superman, who, in my opinion, never got their just desserts. They sold off the rights as teenagers for $130. Between the two of them. They wound up getting what in today's money would be several $1 million. But if you think about a character that's generated over $1 trillion in revenue, that's not even a drop in the bucket. That's less than 1/100th of 1%. So they were both kind of poverty-stricken at the time in the 70s. So Neil got them their at least, a living wage for what they had done. At the time in the 70s, it was about $45,000 a piece, which in today's money would be about $130,000. So, but still in New York, where they live, that's very, very little. So, but he did an awful lot for people that were there before the superstardom of such artists as Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, and Neil Adams. So Neil was really instrumental in a lot of ways in the comic, the Bronze Age, as they call it now, and late Silver Age, I guess. I have to think in numbers here because that's what everything's considered in these days.
Obviously, you are passionate about this. What got you into comics?
Well, I read Harvey comics a lot as a kid. Like your Richie Rich, your Little Lotta, your Little Dot, your Casper, that kind of stuff. And then about age 10, I got to the point where I started enjoying superhero comics. And what kicked it off was Shazam #1, which reintroduced our generation to Captain Marvel, who was huge in the 40s, but then was the loser in a legal battle with Superman, which, neither character is remotely alike, except they both have black hair. And I mean, seriously, you have one character that's a kid and he yells the word Shazam and he turns into a superhero. And then you have Superman, who's from another planet, but he's an adult. I really have never figured out how, that even became a legal issue. But, I have to say, a lot of the things that I deal with now and I work with as a comic historian also kind of feed into a lot of the things I do as a director and as an actor, and host.
So of all those, what's your favorite thing to do? You said direct, you act, you host, you are a historian.
And I'm a cartoonist. You know what? If I had to pick one, I'd have to say acting. Because but I don't push it. I mean, if I got a role on a television series or something like that, I would probably go for it because I've been acting professionally since I was 10. And, I've never had anything major. I've never gotten paid any major money for acting, but it's a passion and something I really enjoy.
You obviously have a musically talented cousin.
Very.
Do you sing?
Yes, I do. I sing more baritone than he does. I'm more a Jim Morrison than a Lyle Lovett as far as my singing quality. My karaoke go-to is "Touch Me" by The Doors. So it's like, come on. That's more my vocal quality. But I really, I write lyrics, and I've never written anything and given it to anyone because I don't feel that confident. However, Lyle is such a lyricist, and before he became big and I was aware of him as my cousin, I did a lot of lyrics before then, when in my college days, in a semi-punk heavy metal band I was in, and I really enjoy that aspect of songwriting. And then I was involved for years here in town in the Gridiron, which is a kind of Saturday Night Live kind of musical satire show that we do, advertising agencies, which I'm considered one of, and journalists, and they get together and they get to get their acting out once a year on this. And I created co-wrote and wrote an awful lot of parody songs. So I love writing parody songs, and I think that's probably where, I kind of bridge that cousin gap there, is enjoying to write lyrics. And, Lyle is probably known as much for his lyrics as any other aspect of his songwriting style. So
yeah, he's phenomenal. Like I said, he's one of my favorite performers live.
Oh, he's
I love
fantastic.
the fact that he has this dry, kind of like Pat Sajak, this dry sense of humor where he plays with the audience.
Absolutely.
Talks about the band, but he doesn't. You never feel like he's taking himself very seriously up there, but yet he's a phenomenal performer.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about here in town. Are you a San Antonio native?
Well, okay, so my parents moved here right before I was born, and my mom was pregnant with me, but they came previously from Hawaii. Then when I was 7, we moved back to Hawaii, and I felt like I'd never left. It was a really strange thing. Then we moved back to San Antonio. So yes, I'm a San Antonio native in a lot of ways, but half of me is also always in Hawaii. So I think of myself as a Tex-Hawaiian, which I've actually entered into the U.S. Census for the last 2 times, and I'm told I'm one of several hundred that have done that. So if you think about it, Chip, it's funny because what do the 2 states have in common? They were both their own countries, and the only countries within the United States that are now states. So that's kind of a really cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. And so I have to think about that so that's why I'm so vehemently something that no one would even think of other than, someone that has lived in both states,
What, do you get back to Hawaii? What do you miss? How do you compare the 2?
Okay, how I compare the 2 is, but I'm coming from San Antonio, but San Antonio, we're very laid back, as I'm sure you've noticed. Yeah. And we're very much, I'll say fair, I guess, when it comes to how we feel about things. It's like when we're really passionate, yes, we're passionate, but we're not overblown about it. And I feel like that merges together and makes me somewhat mellow. But, I can get feisty too. But for the most part, I think it centers me because Hawaii has this almost Zen quality that if you're used to the Texas landscape, and I mean that literally, like the hills and mesas, or not so much mesas, but the hills and valleys that we have here in Texas, they're very similar in the fact that they're so calming and there's so much space in both places as compared to the amount of human beings. So I really enjoy that that kind of cool, almost limbo quality that I get from both states. And so when I go to California, when I go to the East Coast, it's in Chicago. I go to Chicago a lot. It's very different, but I meld. I think I get that from being from both states. It's easy to just blend in. Especially when I go to San Diego every year for Comic-Con. It's one of those things where San Diego is very Texas in a weird way and very Hawaii in a weird way. Yeah. Hawaii-wise, you have the beaches, you have surfers, you have a lot of that mentality. But Texas-wise, it's a military town. And so there's some very, blatant ways they're similar. So, I feel happy pretty much anywhere I am in the state, or anywhere I am. I feel at one and at peace with myself, but I think that comes probably from me being based in San Antonio for as long as I have.
Yeah. Now, before we did our podcast today, you were actually on another podcast. I understand you have several podcasts that are your own.
I do the Geeky Weekly, which is a podcast that's it's basically myself and Kyle Andrews. We're both United States based. And then we have a friend of ours, we call him Johnny Montreal, who of course is from Montreal. And then we have 3 to 4 people that are in the UK. And we do it in Central Time, 2 o'clock on Wednesdays, but it's 8 o'clock their time. So they're enjoying their nighttime and laid back. And Kyle and I are more at the peak of our game because it's the middle of the afternoon and, we're not, tired out yet. But it's a great show. I've been doing it for, it's probably closer to a year at this point than anything else. But the guys I do it with are so great, so connected to the UK comic scene, which is different than us because the UK is not much larger than Texas in population-wise and country-wise. In fact, I'm going to have to look it up. They may be even smaller than us geographically because, I mean, we're Texas. Thank you. So, exactly. So, but we get into, we have an awful lot of interviews. We had J.M. DeMatteis the other day, who he worked quite a bit with Keith Giffen. Sorry, Keith, who passed away last week. And Keith was a big mover and shaker in the industry. He created a slapstick kind of comic mentality that hadn't been seen since the 40s in Green Lantern, which is also a DC comic. And I'm getting a little too deep into the geek here, but we've had an awful lot of great people that we've gotten to interview and see firsthand. It's a fun podcast to do. My other podcast that I've been doing for years is the Comic Book Historian podcast with Alex Grand, and Alex and I co-wrote the book on Neil Adams together.
And what's that podcast about?
Basically, comic history, and what we did when we started, when we were with Jim Thompson, is every week we would do a different year. And so one year, my favorite year was 1956, which was right after the Comics Code Authority came into comics, which was a big deal because suddenly you couldn't just do anything you wanted. You were within a guideline and rule book that was very, very clear and very constrictive in a lot of ways. And we went into Charlton Comics, we went into EC Comics, and it was an era that I'm really happy with. And that was probably my favorite podcast of the original. Now we're doing an awful lot of interviews, and we recently, Alex and our friend Josh Berman, and they've won a bunch of high-level awards for a graphic novel they did called Hashman, which is loosely based, or not loosely, but tightly based on Josh's relationship he has with his dad. And his dad was an early proponent in Seattle for marijuana legalization.
Okay. What directing do you said you directed several shorts. Would you like to do a feature? Have you done features? Is that a direction you want to go?
Yeah. In fact, I want to do a Yeti movie really badly.
The cooler?
All about the cooler. Yeah. Well, we want to do one on what's the? It's not Coda. Cody. Is it Cody? The one that HEB has that I own? I think it's. Is it Cody? Something like that. I think it's Cody. I think it's KODI. My grandfather, who I never knew because he died 25 years before I was born, he and his brother were one of the first people to cite what they call the Falk Monster, which is basically the Arkansas Yeti. And the Legend of Boggy Creek, the movie, that was about him, the Falk Monster. And in 1918, he was 13, and he and his brother Reuben were on a camping trip, and they ran into him. And so ever since I learned that from my dad, which was after he and I saw Boggy Creek together when I was a kid, I've always been fascinated by the idea that my family has a history of seeing Yetis. And my cousin Amy last weekend, told me she saw one in Lampasas when she was growing up. And it's like, maybe we're connected some way with, yeah. So I would love to do like a really good Yeti Bigfoot movie, We've done 7 shorts, and I've directed hundreds of commercials. So yeah, I enjoy filmmaking on the shorter end of things, but I've always, before I finish my career, I would really like to take it out and make a feature.
Now, would you want to star in the Yeti movie too?
I would like to be in it.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to star in it because directing would take too much, but Burt Reynolds directed a lot of his own movies, so
Clint Eastwood's done it.
and Clint. So I would really, I really want to pursue that, and I have such a wonderful crew, and Sean O'Toole, Ian Vasquez, AJ Johnson. All these guys are really close friends of mine too, and it's like a brotherhood of people that want to make film and want to make something, for posterity's sake too, and that makes me happy.
I know this really good actor. He's like 63, silver hair.
I think we could use a guy like that, man. We'll be in touch, Chip. We'll be in touch.
Your people call my people, right? But we're getting close to wrapping up, getting close to time. But
Sure.
Did you or your family ever get a fruitcake from Lyle at Christmas?
No, we did not, which I'm actually grateful for that. Well, it's funny though, because it must be a family thing, because we always sent out the Collins Street Bakery fruitcake, and I'm not sure if I wouldn't be surprised if that was Lyle's fruitcake of choice.
So the reason I asked was that it is.
Oh, that's so weird.
My father-in-law, who passed away, and my brother-in-law was the vice president. Every Christmas, Lyle would call John, my father-in-law, and go, "Here's my order, John, get it out." And it was always a rush because it was right before Christmas. And,
oh, wow.
And John would go, "Lyle, if you give me your order 2 weeks ago, we'll save you thousands in shipping." He's like, "Yeah, I know, John, just get them out." So that was the Collins Street Bakery fruitcake. The deluxe fruitcake is his.
Well, anytime my wife and I say, of course you can, we immediately say, "Of course I can." So yes, my family is very much, and still my favorite place for them now is Waco. They have that
little satellite
standalone.
Right there, yeah.
Oh, it's so good. Oh my gosh! And we don't get up to Dallas as often as we used to, but when we do, we always stop there, going and coming.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's my ad for you guys.
That's my Lyle Lovett story for you.
So I have one story, and I met Lyle. I met him twice, once briefly, and he knew who I was then. Then I met him after that in, I want to say, 2004. He's always been very nice to me, and I happened to see him after his concert at the Majestic here in town. He immediately knew how we were related, because I told him, pretty much from what we both believe and have looked up, we're third cousins. Our great-grandfathers were brothers, and Paul and Thomas. And it's really interesting because he's very aware of, and I became more aware of ancestry after him because it piqued my curiosity. And both sides of our family, both sides of my family, have really interesting places that we go. So does his. His mother is part of the Klein family, and they're like Texas royalty when it comes to raising horses. And so it's very interesting how he made me think about ancestry more, because I'm like, if I got this guy, I don't think I have anyone closer than him, but what a cool relative to be related to. But when we met, funny thing is that because he's so thin, I always thought he would be my height or higher. He's about 3 inches shorter than me, which is strange. I'm only 6'1", but he's so thin, he looks tall. And sorry, Lyle, but no, it was strange. But he still commands just as much as, no matter what his stature is.
He carries himself tall.
He very much so. And he was just so sweet and so nice. Invited me to hang out with him for a while, and was just nothing but, the Texan he is. I mean, he is, honestly, he's in many ways the next generation Willie Nelson, in the sense that people really enjoy and listen to his music in any kind of locale, any situation, it's great and it's relaxing, and so is Willie, for that matter.
He's got humor, but then he's also got serious songs, and,
Yeah.
and it's just a great presence on stage.
No, yeah, he's a little more lighthearted than Willie if you think about it. Willie has some really funny songs, but Lyle is like you're saying, half funny, half serious.
Yeah.
You know, she's no lady, she's my wife. Yeah. I mean, that's the one everybody goes to.
You can have my woman, don't touch my hat.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. You know, you get the vibe.
Yeah.
And you know, he's somebody I look up to. He's somebody. But I will tell you this, and this is like the big epiphany of this episode, maybe. But I had to start looking less like Lyle, because I used to have my hair spiked, and it had nothing to do with him. It's just how I wore my hair, and it was shorter. I started wearing my hair longer and growing facial hair because every day I would get asked one of two things: are you Lyle Lovett, or has anyone ever told you you look like Lyle Lovett? Because if you just look at my face, it's hard, you know, to get around that.
Well, I was about to say, you even have,
you know,
the Gene facial.
Yeah, just like you and Vanna.
Yeah,
when I look at you, I think Vanna.
Well.
Yeah, I'm just like, put a wig on, man.
Yeah.
But no, it's funny because that's the way he's impacted me more. I mean, only because I want to be myself, not because I don't want to be associated with him. Like a lot of people I can think of, you know, famous people, I wouldn't want to, if I was related to him, I wouldn't want.
Yeah.
But for this reason, it's only because I try to be more auteur and more an artist, you know, in a lot of aspects of my life, and mainly in my career. And so I just didn't want that playing on it. But we have one photo together, and it's very evident we're cousins. So, you know, I have that. So,
And I'm kind of the opposite. I'm like just grasping onto my sister's coattails, going, "Hey, look, come on, I'm
here,
around,
I'm right here, I'm down here."
You know, the funny thing is, this podcast came about from the early '90s. I shot a pilot. In the '90s, everyone was getting a talk show. I mean,
right,
UFC,
everybody.
So I shot a pilot called Vanna White's Brothers Talk Show. And it's like, let's just be blatant. Her brother even got a talk show, right?
Yeah, right.
So we shot this pilot, and nothing ever happened with it. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, podcasts, it could be revamped into a podcast, much easier than doing a TV show these days. So,
well, not only that, but you have more of a chance for people to hear you now because it's so wide and so varied. So, can I ask one question real quick? So, what was she like younger? How did she get her start? And did you play any part in that because you've been in media so long?
No, the funny thing was, I'll answer this question. I was working at King World, which was the syndicators back then. And a delivery guy asked me if that's how she got her job, because I worked at King World.
Oh, that's so weird, though.
But no, I got my job because she was on the Wheel of Fortune. She always wanted to be an actress. She wanted to be in television growing up. After our uncle Christopher George on the Rat Patrol, after she saw him on TV, she goes, "That's what I want to do."
He was your uncle? Oh my God!
Not blood, but you know, a Southern uncle. My mother grew up with him and stuff. So
I have many of those.
Yeah, we called him Uncle Chris all my life growing up.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And so she kind of.
So your aunt was Linda Day George at one point.
Yeah.
Just like Julia used to be my cousin for a couple of years. That's great.
And so she went out to Hollywood eventually, and she got this little game show. She thought, "I'll do it for a year or two," and here we are 41 years later.
Isn't that great?
It's amazing. And you know what? And as you were saying, I couldn't ask for a better relative, a better sister.
Oh, right.
I mean, there are some that if I was related, I wouldn't be doing a podcast.
Right, right.
And
me
she
too.
thinks it's funny that I'm doing it. She has a humor with it. And as we're getting close, this is kind of the end. I always have one question I like to ask at the end, and that is, what did I not ask or did we not cover that you really want to share?
You know what? You covered pretty much everything. I can't think of anything that comes to mind, other than I would like to quickly plug the show that my wife and I co-produce on the Shroud of Turin through the Vatican. It's the first TV series that's ever been done on the Shroud of Turin, and I'm the host, and I also co-produce, and Angela Cialana, a close friend of ours, is the director and does a great job. And if you just go to discoverwho.org, it'll come right up to the show. We're about to premiere our second season. It's a show I have a lot of, it's something that's very strong in me, something that we're a Catholic family, so it's something that the Vatican allows us to do, and it's pretty awesome. And I guess that's the only thing, and that's my ongoing media series that I have now, other than the podcast. So that's the only thing I didn't say about, didn't talk about, and it's something very near and dear to me.
Well, that's great. And as we progress in our series, I'm sure we'll have you back some days. I like having local people to come sit down with.
Well,
it's not always on.
And I have a great
screen.
rapport with you. This is wonderful. So thank you so much for having me on, Chip. And I wish you the best of success with
Thanks.
this.
Silver Surfer's my favorite comic, just because I was a surfer growing up.
Well, you know what? And you know, if I had to pick a character that I liked, I would say, and it came from the same comic book, I would have to say Ben Grimm, the Thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have that, the Fantastic Four in common too. So, wow.
I certainly appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much, Chip.
I thank Bill Field for being here today. I'd like to thank our partners, Nelco Media, for making this happen. Otherwise, I would be sitting home twiddling my thumbs. You know, whether you're a subscriber or you've come across us by accident or someone recommended us, I am truly humbled and grateful that you spent your time listening and watching us today. Had a great time. I learned a lot about comics today that I didn't know, and I certainly hope that you will share this with your family and friends. And, you know, here's the cool part. If you're famous, or if you know someone famous, or you're related to someone famous, get in touch with us. I always need guests. Thank you.
You've been listening to Relatively Famous with Chip White. Please like and subscribe to Relatively Famous with Chip White.